Okay. What were we talking about earlier with the anchor? What were you saying?
I wasn't saying anything.
Like the Human Torch was like falling off the couch or something?
No, he was denied a bank loan.
Okay, the Human Torch was denied a bank loan. Yeah.
And the arsonist had oddly shaped feet.
Okay. Yeah. So we were talking about things that are on fire and feet.
No, we're warming up our lips.
Yeah,
That's right.
We're warming up for this episode just for all you people out there. So, there's your cold open.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the NerdBrand Podcast. I'm Jason Davis. This is Mitch, and this is John.
Hello.
So we're here today. We're going to talk about legacy brands or brand legacy. Depends.
It does depend.
Does.
Do you want me to define it?
Please do
for the
so.
class?
Please do so.
A legacy brand is kind of something that's been like retired or expired by the company, but a lot of people still use it. So like Windows XP, right? That's been sort of deprecated.
That makes me
But it's
just
still
feel
everywhere.
Old. Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's not that old. I was, it's a little bit. Yeah, whatever. And brand legacy is more like, brand value. The normal stuff we usually talk about, brand equity, like the Apples and Nikes of the world. And
Right.
Ford and,
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Appreciate
You're
you catching
welcome.
on to that. I got that text message from John on the way to the studio. He was like, "Hey, by the way," and I like how you were like, "Just for consideration." I mean,
Well,
I felt like you wrote an ad to me.
No, I try not to be too critical, but I also don't want like other branding people to listen and be like, these people don't know what they're talking about, or customers.
Right.
Well, the thing that I'm finding is that if you actually give a term now and you provide the definition to it, it's not enough. You got to provide a story. And then if you provide that story, you can actually sum up like what it's about. Like I've been having conversations about what is, and we're going to talk about this on a future episode, what is brand positioning. Because a lot of people are giving pitches. There's more networking events happening. People are talking about their companies and what they do, but actually it's very confusing and it's not really what they do. So they're taking the wrong term and applying it to their organization. And everybody's like, "Oh, you do that." And it's like, no, they don't. So we have to, but that's kind of what we do. We get to come at the table and kind of clarify that a bit, because brand positioning is how you sit in the mind of your consumer, how your product or whatever. So example is when you hear the name Doritos, you don't think about, root beer, which is on the topic today as well. So anyways, on this episode, we're talking about legacy brands. Some brands have been around for years, other decades, a few centuries more. Let's discuss that and some of the properties that might be coming into public domain in 2024. So we'll try to get to that because there's some exciting stuff getting ready to happen. Mickey Mouse. That's the last impression I'll probably do on this mic because that sounded weird.
It was a good effort.
Yeah. Anyway.
It was an effort.
Anyway, but thank you, John, for stating and level setting what is a legacy brand versus brand legacy. But Mitch has come with like fancy notes.
Well, no, I just when you mentioned the topic was going to be legacy brands, and I thought legacy, and I thought, brands kind of pop up right and left these days. I mean, I guess because of the digital age, entrepreneurship has kind of exploded. So there's lots of brands popping up all over the place. But I thought, what about the ones that have had staying power, the ones that have been around for a long time? So it's kind of a little quick cursory search. And I just thought it was interesting, some of these brands that still market, how long they've actually been around. I just thought that was kind of interesting. For example, Stella Artois, which I guess over the last 10 years has kind of risen to prominence. They've done a lot more advertising, at least in the United States. They've been around since 1366. Okay.
That's not that long.
I don't think people speaking English during that time would be English that we would even understand,
Right.
I mean, I remember somebody, like there's scholars out there, like how people walked even was different, so like it's weird. There's just the things you could find on YouTube when diving into history, because I love history. I get down those rabbit holes, and that's what triggered me to think about that when you said 13. I was like, oh wow, this is like when Dracula?
Canterbury Tales.
Yeah, I was like,
where's that from? Is it Germany, France? Do you know?
France or
It
Belgium?
It could be.
I didn't look that deep.
I just didn't know. You know random things.
So for the purpose of this podcast, if you know what it is, leave a note in the comments below.
Yeah,
I'll just try to cover that.
I mean, anybody out there. I mean, if you want to put in the comments, Mitch, you're an idiot. They're not. They're not from there. They're from X. I'm thinking they're from Belgium.
Yeah,
because
It sounds right.
Belgians hate to be confused with the French because their language sounds so familiar. Anyway, I thought that was interesting.
See,
And
you always know little. That's why I asked you. Who knows that?
Yeah, we just lost the Belgian audience
well, I think
or the French. I don't know.
part of where I got that was the Hercule Poirot, the detective in the Agatha Christie novels.
Okay. I was thinking Ross Perot.
No, not Perot, Poirot. Okay. Part of his character is he's always been, because his name sounds French, he's actually from Belgium, and would irritate him when people would confuse him for being French.
Huh.
So, okay, well then why didn't you guys come up with a singular language so that people wouldn't confuse you?
It's all their fault.
Well, I'm pretty sure that there's a reason that the world doesn't have a singular language. And I think the Bible mentions something about a Babel thing happening.
Talk about rabbit holes.
Yeah, that would be a rabbit. What you got next?
Well, and this also brought to mind the fact that what we consider old in the United States versus when you go to Europe when things are ancient.
Yeah.
Okay? But for example, Tabasco has been around since 1865.
Making your eggs tastes good every morning still.
A brand I didn't know was still around, but I remember hearing about it.
We'll move on.
Yeah, right. I remember hearing about this one like in history class, like in high school or something. The Hudson Bay Company.
What did they do?
They started out as fur traders. When North America opened up and once people started settling here, they've been around since 1670. They're still around. They have retail stores in Canada. I didn't know that.
Interesting.
I thought that was interesting. And just one more I'll throw out that I thought was interesting. It's a nameplate of a brand, but which in itself is sort of a brand. But the Chevy Suburban has been around since 1935, and it's the oldest continuous auto nameplate in existence.
Wow. Did not know that.
Yep.
So for you out there listening or watching, you're like, man, I learned something today.
Well, and this goes to John's point about brand legacy. I mean, that's pretty, you think about it, that's any of these. To have that kind of brand longevity is, I mean, that's admirable.
Yeah.
I mean, because the power that gives your brand alone, you're omnipresent. People just take you, I mean, and I mean this in a good way, they take you for granted. You've always been there. You're not the new kid on the block. You don't have to fight anybody. You've built a singular reputation for yourself. And I'm trying to think if there's any brands that have been around with that kind of length that have stumbled in recent years and that have kind of lost their way. And I mean, Pepsi's kind of had hits and misses over the last 20 years.
Yeah. I think all brands, I mean, we all remember the whole new Coke debacle. I mean,
there's stuff like that. And I mean, I guess PR issues, but like Toyota, all them auto manufacturers have had, their recalls or their cars rolling over, or tire manufacturers. I mean, stuff like that. Volkswagen had their debacle not too long ago, and you have like the Beetle that they've embraced that kind of roots and brought it back.
It's funny you use the word debacle with Volkswagen after when we did talk about the previous episode. Like, that's a little bit more than a debacle. That's a WTF.
I was trying to be nice to them.
I think the proper term is fraud.
It's a little criminal behavior.
Yeah, they put monkeys in rooms and gas them.
Do what?
Yeah, really?
Yeah, it's on a documentary on Netflix.
Didn't know that.
I thought we were just talking about the emissions.
The fraudulent emissions.
Well, that's what I meant by that. I mean,
or fuel standards. No, it's fuel standards.
Yeah.
Or was it emissions?
No, it was emissions. They were trying to say that the engines ran basically
cleaner than what they actually did.
And they didn't at all. So they decided to set up a lab in Arizona, and they actually took a Chevy truck. I don't remember what brand or model of that, but they brought that out, and then they brought one of their Volkswagen vehicles. At the lab, they hooked up to the tailpipe. I mean, they did stuff that people do to, unfortunately, kill themselves in garages. Maybe edit that part out.
This is really taking a turn.
Yeah,
it's getting
just
dark.
saying, might edit this out a little bit, but they actually did that. But so they would put somebody in a room or an animal in a room, and then they would run the engine and then feed the gas from the tailpipe into that room just to see what the effect. Yeah, I know, right? And so that kind of came out on the documentary. Anyways,
isn't that special?
Yeah, you can take some liberty there, editing there, Robert.
Thumbs up.
I don't want a lawsuit from VW.
I do.
Ignore John.
Any publicity is good publicity.
Exactly.
Oh man, no.
You made an interesting designation that kind of there in your comment, and that is the PR aspect of brand awareness or of a brand versus the conscious marketing effort of the brand, and how things that happen in the natural economic ecosystem with your brand versus the marketing effort you consciously enter into, the endeavors you do enter into to push your brand. There can be missteps on either side of that. I mean, you talk about Volkswagen and their problems, Coke and their problem with New Coke. That was a marketing stumble. Products also, like you mentioned, Firestone and other brands that have had product problems. How those are two different sort of stumbles, but the way you can address them are kind of similar. You can come back and sort of course correct through branding and marketing.
I mean, that to me, that's one of the biggest values of having that high, of being a brand with a lot of equity and legacy, is you have that ability to be okay. Toyota went through huge issues. Nobody stopped buying Toyotas. It came and went, and the market doesn't really forget necessarily, but they have enough equity. They've, it's like a bank account. They've invested enough over the years to have a withdrawal in a sense. And so,
which is an excellent segue, because all the stuff we're talking about today, if you're listening to this podcast, you're kind of like, I remember something that happened a couple weeks ago of a major brand that just rebranded and called itself something weird because, it's all meta. So timing of doing so to kind of get the market and people to forget about like the oops is like really important. And I'm going to say that the timing of this rebrand project for Meta was not well timed.
I don't know about timing. And this is a whole other topic for a podcast. I just don't know about that name. To me, it just seems lazy.
Aren't they leaning into like metaverse, and because they want to be perceived as doing a lot more than just social networking?
They want to
technology.
They do. I mean, to me, it's sort of like years ago. In my generation, we were like, we know one day there's going to be two internets. There's going to be the internet, which there's already two internets, by the way. There's the dark web and all that. But it's like the internet for those that pay for it, and those that are just free. And the free is going to be less valuable to you information-wise as the paid version. So this is sort of like what I see steering into that. So you've got the metaverse, and then you just got like, whatever you get from AT&T or whatever. And I mean that, because it's like, what are they trying to do with this? Because right now on Reddit, some folks are saying like, this is like a free game you download for VR for like $3 off the internet. This doesn't look like anything impressive right now to me.
Like I said, I think the name itself to me just comes off as lazy, because we're kind of in an age where brands really spend a lot of time and energy crafting a name that really creates a persona for who they are. Meta is a word you pull out of the dictionary. And not only that, it's become a very common colloquial term.
Yeah. Well, as a developer, to me, metadata is a big deal. I mean, it's in images, it's in a lot of things. Being a WordPress developer for like 12 years, it's like there's a post meta table in the database, and a lot of stuff goes in there about what occurs on your site, and that I get. That's probably where the inspiration comes from.
No doubt.
They want to create a web that is probably more secure or feels secure. So I can kind of see like why it was chosen, but I'm like, I'll just say like in NerdBrand, the branding expertise and everything, I always yield to John and Mitch for a reason, because I'm a web developer. We don't really come up with always good ideas when it comes to names.
Well, I mean, like I said, maybe I don't mean to misjudge them. I'm sure they had a lot of people, or a few key people in a room that put thought, time, and energy into it. I would have hoped they came up with something novel, something fresh. I guess that's what it's just. Meta doesn't sound fresh to me. It's going to be a term that's dated.
Well,
in
they've been Facebook
5 years
now for what, since 2005.
Well, and Coca-Cola's been Coca-Cola since the turn of the century.
Right, but still, the point is, it's been that way. Like I still call the Sears Tower the Sears Tower. I don't call it the Willis Tower. Even though it's been around since the 90s, and it's just like I don't see, unless there is really heavy publications and PR, really heavy push online in every digital way, and the app, the site, and everything. Unless they really push that name, people are still going to call it Facebook.
Oh, well, you raise a very good point. I mean, I thought about this. I was walking the dogs last night, thinking about this topic we're talking about, and there are terms that become so commonplace and some become so ingrained in the popular culture that they kind of take on. It's a brand name that can take on the whole category it exists in.
Yes.
For example, Coke. You can go into a restaurant and somebody say, "What would you like to drink?" And they'll, what kind of Coke do you have? Mm-hmm. Well, there's really only one Coke.
Yeah. Well, in some parts of the country, they say pop.
Right. But you get my point.
I do. Yeah.
We don't like those places. I'm just kidding.
We don't drive there. We fly over those places.
But your point about Facebook is well taken. Is that regardless, it'll be interesting to watch that regardless how long they go with Meta, which they're probably going to stick with it whenever.
I think they're too far invested into
it. But Facebook,
Maybe.
Facebook has become
rollback.
Yeah, Facebook has become so ingrained in everybody's psyche. It's gonna take a while. That's why I think it would have been more valuable to come up with a name that had the same kind of novelty, the same kind of interesting clarity of what they were about.
I would have changed nothing really about the name, but I would have changed.
That's a whole other discussion.
I would have changed their purpose. I would have done something to help redirect and ingrain in the minds of people what their intentions were. Now, we are talking about an app that was designed at Harvard to basically a hot or not type thing. Let's not forget where some of these things started. They weren't exactly from an altruistic background. I'll just leave it at that. Well. But I would have not changed the name, because sometimes when you have a name and it sticks, you run into something, you're like, okay, I can build on that.
You've hit gold.
Yeah, so you've got the name, the voice, all that's going to stay the same. It's the tones that are different. We talked about tone of your brand. On this podcast, we're very goofy and fun and try to be entertaining, give you a glimpse into our world and what we know about branding and web and marketing and all these things. Then you go to channels that John and Camaria manage online, and you get a different kind of tone. It's more professional. It's a little bit more like, here's the information. This is what this is. Here's why. It's very like boom, 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 So I think that being aware, self-aware, is the most important thing to a brand, being self-aware. And I feel like Facebook is kind of like what you said. They've lost their way, and they've gone through a lot of stuff lately.
Oh, yeah. I mean, which is why they're doing, which is why I think they're doing what they're doing. They want to be perceived differently.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure.
They may not necessarily
want to get the spotlight off of them.
Well,
yeah, but a name change ain't going to get the spotlight off. It's just going to amplify it.
They want to change the intensity of that light.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's a good way to say that.
They want a softer, more flattering light on them rather than a hot spotlight of, what are you guys up to? I don't see anything in their brand itself that says we're changing the way we're doing things.
I don't believe it, but like I was watching a Roku channel and saw a Facebook ad, and they were running ads promoting internet regulation. And I thought, wait, what? I was like, I don't believe anything you guys are saying, for one, about internet regulation. And also, I don't want the internet regulated.
Right.
It was a weird position to me, like from a brand that thrives on the internet and kind of wants that youthful culture and the youth audience to be drawn to them, to support regulating the thing that the youth.
Yeah, sometimes when you go through a brand crisis, you kind of want to be like, maybe just be quiet for a little bit, because anything we say is going to be misconstrued, taken out of proportion. I mean, there's just a lot, in just being silent.
Well, I think part of it maybe is, they've been getting a lot of flack for censoring people because, this is a self-perpetuating mechanism that's kind of come into being. Is that, people have taken for granted Facebook is a free site I go to, and I put information out there about myself or say what I want to say. And they've gotten used to kind of an atmosphere that intentionally or unintentionally says you can do what you want. Then in the last couple of years, they've saying, well, no. We're going to decide what you can put on our platform. Now, granted, it's their sandbox.
Yeah.
You may not have read the terms and conditions of participation, but it's it's their property.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think
But what they're trying to do is they're trying to say, okay, we've been looked at as a bad guy because we're supposedly censoring people.
yeah.
Well, if the government comes in and starts doing it, then we're not the bad guy anymore.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's it's lazy.
Yeah. I mean, well, my favorite is the Twitter CEO. I love him and how he handled himself in the questionings that he had taken in Congress. And I know that a lot of the other CEOs, they would give these long expounding, expositions to an answer. And you got to remember, congressman, senator, whatever, is a lawyer. They're going to ask you the same question 4 or 5 times in a different way, try to catch you.
Mhm.
So I loved how he was just like, no, that's not true. And then he stopped talking. And then there's this awkward pregnant pause. And I'm like, I love you, because he's not giving them anywhere to go, because he's flat saying, no, not true.
Mhm.
No, not true. And then just stopping. And he said, and he maintained Twitter's a, town square. They deviate from that, then that happens. And of course, he explained, like, this is how we regulate that. Of course, nobody needs to be running into a town square doing silly things, but it's like at the end of the day, he's like, we don't deviate from that. So I think Twitter has really done a lot to kind of clean itself up. I've been on there more just kind of browsing as a voyeur, and I've been, is that not the right word? I shouldn't say that word. Because you both looked at me like, what?
Well,
I don't know.
it's all about intent.
I
I'm
don't
gonna
work
pause
here.
you guys for just a second
Yeah.
on that one. You're looking back and forth at the camera a lot
Uh-huh.
when you're going just a few seconds ago, and it's come up a few times. I just want to make you aware of it and see if it's something that you are okay with,
Look
or
at
if you
us.
want them to keep doing.
No, I'm okay with looking at the camera, because it's kind of like I feel like I'm
Okay, just wanted
talking to
make
the
sure that-
audience maybe a little bit.
That's just up to your approach. Just
Yeah,
wanted to make
I
sure it
always
was
had
something
that
you're proud
problem on
of.
Zoom, because on Zoom you got that green dot, and then I would look down at them on my screen, and I know that they see my eyes go to somewhere.
Mhm.
And I never really talk to you all about it, because I'm like, it's a really hard habit to break.
Mhm.
And I always try to look at the dot, which means I can't see what's going on here, but it's a connection thing that but if it looks like crap,
It's the back and forth part.
okay,
That's the main thing. My personal opinion would be just to be
just on them.
when you're in the conversation,
Yeah.
to stay engaged with them.
Okay.
But when you are specifically, intros and
honest,
outros and
Yeah.
bringing up the questions,
Okay.
then to look at the camera. And
Think-
it just takes some time.
Think Sunday political panel shows.
Why did you have to say that?
No, I'm just saying they talk to each other,
I
and then
don't even
and then
watch
like when
them.
they go to a break, they'll talk to the audience. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
I'm just that's all.
You watch.
I used to. I don't anymore.
Ugh. What a way to spend your Sunday.
Well, I used to. I don't anymore.
I spend my Sunday on the couch surfing Netflix, man.
I usually spend my Sunday cooking breakfast.
Okay. Well. Anyway.
I'm coming to your house.
I will.
Oh, the clock is not running.
It's not right. I'll chime in with the time every once in a while. You're about take away 2 minutes now. You're at 20 minutes.
Okay.
So,
Right.
and just give me the heads up when you want to start so I can timestamp it. Now that I've completely thrown you off and everything, called
good.
you out.
We're about to
and all
change
that.
subjects.
We throw ourselves off. You're not doing anything we don't do to ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, really, it's that bad sometimes. But no, you're good. You're
3,
good.
2, 1.
Anyway, since we've been talking about Facebook and art meta, sorry, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do.
Well, let me say this. I mean, I could go into a long diatribe of
Please
yeah,
do. Go
I mean,
for it.
about whether or not the rules these social platforms, whether or not the employer can seem arbitrary at times. Nevertheless, the bottom line is, it's their platform. They own it. Whether you're or not you, like I said, you're aware of what those terms of use are.
Mm-hmm.
That's not their fault, and that's not their problem. They have rules, and if you're going to play on their playground, you have to play by their rules.
I think to a certain degree, yeah, that's true. I mean, but to the episode we did with Shane, it's like rented land, right?
Mhm.
Right, exactly.
And business owners, I think, have because it's so expensive to do like branding and advertising and web and all that. It's really easy to fire up a Facebook page, business page, and then start marketing. But we know the visibility of those pages is almost zilch,
Mhm.
Organically. I mean, it's really not, because Facebook is all about connecting people, not people to faceless entities or businesses. And so I think that happened like, what, 2-3 years ago, where they just really kind of said, you know what?
I mean, it was right when they went public, so probably like 2015.
Yeah.
I mean, you started to feel the squeeze in the algorithm.
Yeah.
You didn't get that organic reach anymore.
Right. Yeah. So now you had to like dump a bunch of money in ads, but then everybody was like, "Am I really getting ROAS out of this? Return on ad spend out of this? Am I really? Is that?" I've never been. I've always been of the opinion that no, you have to spend like 3 times the amount of money to get some sort of return on Facebook. We know otherwise on other platforms that's not true, but that's always how I felt. So if you spent $2,000, you need to expect maybe you get back 3, maybe. So I always felt that it was a little weird on Facebook to try to figure out like, what am I going to get if I dump into this? Of course, everybody jumps at the $50.
Yeah. I mean, it depends. I mean, for like a business to business service, yeah, you're not really going to see that ROI. But I mean, e-commerce businesses have been thriving. That's why everybody's losing their head over the Apple iOS changes, because it's having a legit, just murderous impact on small businesses and e-commerce businesses who were getting a 4 or 5 times return on ad spend in Facebook.
Yeah.
So that's a mess into itself, and that's just beginning. I mean, it's a multi-year effort at this point for a lot of companies to figure out how to track the conversions and get back to where they were.
Well, and this all goes back to the whole privacy issue, right? I mean, it's this whole effort, people finally waking up, and this goes back to terms of use and all that, and people not being aware, being used to feeling like I can go on these platforms and it's freewheeling, anything goes. Oh wait, they're not doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They're collecting data with these interactions, and they're monetizing it.
That's the interesting debate happening right now. It's like a lot of small businesses are genuinely being harmed. By the privacy window coming down and them not being able to market like they used to. But then the other side of it is like, yeah, but they were doing that because this other entity, Facebook, was borderline stealing people's identity and personhood to provide the marketing mechanism. And it's just a weird, like, you don't like to see small businesses harmed, obviously, and shutting down or having revenue drops. But
well, it's probably another podcast episode to debate about gated, ungated content, because I have been seeing a lot more gated content lately.
That's what it all goes back to.
And I think that that's going to happen, and that's the way that so-and-so publisher can insulate themselves from being exposed like that, which for years people have said, well, Facebook's going to charge money to be on there, and they're like, no. But it's
hard to turn that ship around, man. I mean, look what happened in newspapers. That when they all started to go online and went gated, thinking, well, people subscribe to their home newspaper, they'll now subscribe to what we've been putting up for free for a couple of years now. No, they'll find someplace else to get the information.
I will say I won't say how, but there are ways to get around that gate that many don't implement very well. But another podcast episode, perhaps.
Exactly.
Anyways, the last thing I want to kind of hit on, because I mentioned it earlier, there are things coming up for public domain that is...
Speaking of legacy.
Yeah. So, Disney and Mickey Mouse, of all things. Well,
Steamboat Willie in particular, is it?
Yes, Steamboat Willie. So, the last hand is January 1st of 2024. We'll see the expiration copyright for Steamboat Willie. And with it, Disney's claim to the film's star, Mickey Mouse. So you can imagine.
Is this the first time this has come up in the public? Because it seems like it's been around for so long.
I think it's something 100 plus years or whatever. So it's been, about that.
Okay.
And that's why, because also copyrights to Superman, Batman, as well as Disney's Snow White and early Looney Tunes characters will all fall into public domain between 2031 and 2035.
Well, technically, wasn't Snow White probably public domain at the time that Disney created the animated film? I mean, it's a Grimm. I think it's a brother. It goes back to like
Brothers Grimm tales. Yeah, but I mean, it's like John Carter. Is it John Carter Mars? Yeah, even that.
Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Yeah, even that's public domain, and they made a movie out of it, and then it flopped because everybody wanted to see Lorax more than they wanted to see that.
That brings up an interesting point, because I'm going to have to go back and research this, because there's somebody who owns the rights to Edgar Rice Burroughs' properties.
Well, they own the works, and the family does.
The family still does. Yeah.
But they don't really, like, if you want to grab it and read it, publicate it, do something with it like that, you can. You just have to reach out to them, say, hey, we're going to do that. I mean, there's not a lot.
I think the same thing with Robert E. Howard and the Conan.
Yeah.
Conan universe.
Conan as well. There is a bunch of them that we will see over the next 5 to 6 years that are going to expire, and we're going to see a lot of creativity probably from lawyer teams, especially from Disney, because when Mickey Mouse is up for like that, they're going to be like, whoa, hold on a minute, and that's
What do you do?
I don't know. I don't know. It's just going to be really interesting to watch what happens.
Well, I mean, now granted, Walt Disney created Mickey Mouse.
Mm-hmm.
The company is still, well, now it's a publicly traded company. I don't know, boy, what do you do?
What could happen? I mean, could like another company like Sony come in and, or another big conglomerate come in and take it?
I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. I have no idea.
Really?
But I think that it's sort of really close to what we saw with James Gunn doing a knockoff of the Superman story with Sony Studios, but it was Brightburn.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of like that because it's basically Superman, but it's a horror movie, and it's the same exact characters, but they are not named Kent or anything like that.
Yeah. What if Superman had been really, really bad?
Yeah. What if he became an adolescent and used his laser vision to just kill his teacher because he didn't like the homework? I mean, it was kind of that kind of a thing. And then he used the same title cards, by the way, as Man of Steel that Zack Snyder used, which I thought was really, really funny. But anyways, I digress. It's just, I feel like that, but then you could be more probably implicit with the fact that this is this character.
Yeah. I mean,
you can actually use their name.
Right. If I understand correctly, it's like Dracula. I mean, anybody can make a Dracula movie without having to pay any kind of royalty or fee to the family of Bram Stoker or any of that, or Frankenstein, or Ulysses. The Odyssey. Anybody can make those movies because that stuff nobody really owns it now.
Right. Yeah. So, it's just, I think that's what it is. I think that instead of creating characters that, we all know, now you can just say it. And I think that's what it is. Now, when it gets into merch, that's really going to be a hard one to answer, because that's when you're like if we were to put out merchandise and we put Batman on our shirts and NerdBrand there, that'd be really cool. I don't imagine that could not be a possibility in the future. But, you're making money off that icon.
Off somebody else's property.
Exactly. So now you do have to get into that royalty mess and kind of like, okay, what happens here? Because, I mean, it's the same thing with sports teams, There's a reason that on certain channels, the NFL has their opening sound, even the music.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you're not going to find that anywhere else, and you're not allowed to play it or use it.
Right.
And so otherwise you get a lawsuit. But when it gets into public domain, another 50, 70 years from now, well, whoops,
Let's start making Mickey Mouse merch.
Mickey Mouse merch. Say that 3 times fast.
I'm not going to.
Yeah. After quoting Anchorman, be like, the Flash ran out of fumes. I don't know what y'all were doing. I'm like, all right, whatever.
What is that? The Flash has fumes?
Maybe.
Does he have to register with the EPA or something?
I don't know. I mean,
let's ask Volkswagen.
And with that, I think that's a good wrap to the end of that.
Full circle.
That's right.
It has.
He brought it right back around.
Yeah, that brought that right back around. So if you want to listen to this podcast or subscribe to it, go find us anywhere online at NerdBrand Agency, or you can go to nerdbrandagency.com/podcast, and then you can watch or listen to this podcast. Special thanks to the Speakeasy guys. You guys are awesome. You've done a great job. I appreciate you so much for helping, produce this and finish it out and all that. It's been awesome. So, with that, I don't really have much else to you.
Any old business?
Any old new business? Any new business? We'll do the Rogers rules.
Where's
of
my gavel?
Board meetings.
Where's my gavel?
Anything before I say?
I'm the sergeant at arms. I've always wanted to be one of those.
What?
Yeah. And when you have a board or whatever it's called, you've got like a president and a treasurer and a secretary and a sergeant of arms. I thought, do they pull out a sword, and if people get out of line, they cut their
I've been on
hand
2
off
boards, and I've never met a sergeant of arms.
I'm the surgeon general. Or something.
I've got this pain. Anyway.
Yeah, sergeant of arms is in charge of all the pencils and paper. That's their job. Yeah, you go into a nonprofit board. That's their job. They're in charge of the pencils.
We have
any sharp object.
Just a bin of arms.
Yeah. All right, and with that, again, thank you for listening, and tune in next time. And remember, keep your nerd brand strong.